Jets deal the Rams a really difficult loss to deal with.
This loss will demoralize us only as much as we allow it to. Sick to your stomach about it.
Look, they played hard. In many respects, I'm happy for those players because it's miserable when you lose.
It's like they just won the Super Bowl, honestly.
No one plays this game to lose. As Herm Edwards said, you
play to win the game.
And no one wants to be 0-16. And some of these players don't give a damn about the number one pick for next year. No one wants to be on a squad that went 0-16. So congratulations to the Jets.
You got that right, Michael Eaves. And by the way, if you're a Jet fan, you probably felt like the last time you won a game, CeCe Peniston was actually big on the musical scene. You didn't think I had that in me, did you?
I didn't think you had it in you, but I saw you nodding your head as we were coming back from break, so I shouldn't be surprised.
Tapping that foot. That was a good tune back in the day. Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin presented by Progressive Insurance. You heard all that on 98.7 FM and, of course, on SportsCenter on ESPN as well. It's Keyshawn, J. Will, Zubin coming to you live from above the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17. That great laugh courtesy of the Super Bowl champion Chris Canty. Jay and Keyshawn are getting some well-deserved time off. We'll see them back soon enough, but it's an NFL Monday, so who better to have than a Super Bowl champion? Of course, Key was one. We'll swap out one on offense for one on D. So here we go. The Jets get that win. Mike Greenberg, our resident Jet fan, he'll be here at 7:15 a.m. Eastern to tell you what it means. Was a win actually a loss when you regard draft consideration, with the Jags now moving in to the top spot? But before we get to the Jets, there was another team that pulled off a win yesterday with an embattled quarterback of their own. And that, of course, is the Chicago Bears, in far better shape to obviously make the playoffs than the Jets would ever be this season. Remember, they were a 3-0 team out of the gate, and the Jets are now a 1-13 team. But Trubisky has had a lot of struggles. There's been a ton of criticism. There's been a benching. There's been bringing him back. And that big win against the Vikings, some great numbers on what it means moving forward for Chicago. But first, let's just give it up to the much-maligned Mitch on what it means to still be alive for the postseason.
We're excited. I mean, this is what you play for. You play for an opportunity to get into the playoffs, and we had a bad streak going there, but we knew if we stuck together and battled as a family and just kept leaning on each other, that we can make a run. And we put ourselves in a position to do so. But at the end of the day, it comes down to being focused one day and one game at a time. And we got to enjoy this today, but then also go back to work next week. But the guys in the locker room are excited. There's really good camaraderie right now. Just an intensity and focus that I like to see, and we're in a good spot, and we just got to keep that going.
So they are in a good spot. I want to mention, Chris, this is the one thing more than anything, and obviously this was a huge game between 6 and 7 teams, and essentially Minnesota's playoff hopes have totally evaporated with that loss. Chicago is right in there battling it out there with Arizona at the bottom of the playoff picture. In the NFC, they will play the Jacksonville Jaguars next week, so a chance to continue to build for a Jags team that obviously won week 1, has not won since then. Think about that for a second. But the thing I really liked about the Bears yesterday, anecdotally, every time Minnesota fought back, the Bears had an offensive drive to counter them. And that's something I haven't seen all season long. Montgomery was absolutely great. And for a young, struggling quarterback to have Montgomery play the way he did yesterday, a $146 on the ground. But what I really enjoyed, Matt Nagy now 5-1 against the Vikings, not often mentioned. Minnesota kept fighting back, credit to them. But every time they did, the Bears' struggling offense answered the bell almost every single time.
No, I mean, the Chicago Bears beat the Minnesota Vikings at their own game. They controlled time of possession by being able to run the football. They had 42 rushes for 200 yards. So, I mean, that's the story of the game. That's the formula that the Minnesota Vikings try to employ with Dalvin Cook, being able to control the clock and play good defense. But that Chicago Bears offense, they found an identity last couple of weeks, and that's behind David Montgomery. Remember, at last week's game against the Texans, the first play of the game, David Montgomery takes it 80 yards, hits his head on the goalpost. This week, he's got 32 carries for 146 yards and a couple of touchdowns. But the most impressive part about his game was 9 of his 32 carries went for first downs. And so when you keep the offense on schedule, it makes the game easier for Mitch Trubisky, and that's what we saw yesterday. And Matt Nagy obviously catering to Trubisky, giving him completions that he's comfortable with. A lot of easy completions within the flow of the game yesterday for Trubisky, and he took advantage of them. 71% completion percentage. He did have the one turnover, but he was able to stay within himself. He didn't make those egregious mistakes that we've seen him in games past. He didn't lose the game for his team, and he just managed it, and I think that was the difference.
And right now they stand at 7-7, which is just outside of the playoff picture looking in. They're in the 8th spot. The Cardinals have the coveted 7th spot after their win over the Eagles at 8-6. So the Bears are 1 game back. But as I mentioned, they're taking on, I guess all season long we had to say that the Jets were the worst team in the league. Maybe right now that distinction belongs to Jacksonville. And for the Bears, perfect timing. That's exactly where they're going. 2 wins in a row. Obviously, the quality of competition is what it is. A struggling Texans team, Minnesota yesterday. But remember, right before that 2-game winning streak, they had lost to the Lions. So you just don't know what you're getting from this Bears team.
And that was because of Trubisky's turnover at the end of that game.
Correct.
Yeah.
And now they come back, and you could put both of those wins largely to an extent on his shoulders. They get Jacksonville on the road. Nothing's a gimme. And then January 3rd, gigantic game because you have to wait to see exactly if the Saints can kind of put a little pressure on the Packers. Bears, Packers to end the regular season. A handful of weeks ago, people were like, it's a great rivalry game, but that's all it's going to mean. There could be some significance for both teams at the top and bottom of the NFC playoff picture in Week 17.
Hey, no doubt. The Green Bay Packers still could be playing for that number 1 seed. The question is, if they do have the number 1 seed and that game does mean something for Chicago in terms of getting in, if you're Matt LaFleur, do you play your starters and you keep a division rival out? That will be an interesting scenario to see how that played out.
No doubt. Let's talk about the Jets a little bit here in just a moment. But first, speaking of the Packers, you're in a situation where they win. They're in the top spot in the NFC. They took on a really struggling Carolina team. I see all these writers talk about Carolina. Matt Rule is building. I don't see it, man. I think their defense is terrible. He signed a $60 million deal before ever putting on the headset in an NFL game. And I get it. It's a long-term play. They have a new aggressive owner, David Tepper, that's willing to spend money. But all these writers that I respect, all these voices I hear on ESPN and beyond, it's a long-term play for Carolina. I don't know if they got the right quarterback, and they certainly don't have the right defense. What's interesting is Aaron Rodgers, despite the win and the fact that next Sunday night, they're going to take on the team with, I think, the worst defense in the NFL, the Tennessee Titans. And we know what Aaron is like when he's on fire. That offense against that defense on Sunday Night Football, off a win with easy pickings coming, you would think, at least on the offensive side for Green, is not happy.
It is frustrating, but we're 11-3. We won the game. That's a good problem to have. We just know that type of football in the second half, not going to get it done in the playoffs. That's where we're going. That's the trajectory that we're on. We're going to at least host a home playoff game. We win these next 2, we're going to be the 1 seed. So we need to play better these next 2 weeks.
Off a win. By the way, that's off a win. You just hear it in his voice.
No, he's frustrated because the offense wasn't as productive as you've seen them. I think they got a little comfortable. They took their foot off the gas because they got out to a 3-possession lead early in that game, and then the Carolina Panthers clawed their way back in. But they've got to find a way to be able to throw that knockout punch. You're going to have to do that when you get into postseason play, and I think that's what Aaron Rodgers is frustrated about. You can't forget how they were ousted out of the playoffs last year. They went out to San Francisco, and that game wasn't even close. I think Jimmy Garoppolo threw a total of 8 passes. So, if you're the Green Bay Packers, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because that is the identity of the team, you got to figure out how to knock teams out of those games. They didn't do that with the Carolina Panthers. A team from a talent perspective is inferior to them, and that's got to be frustrating for a quarterback that's playing at an MVP level.
That's fair enough. And we should also mention on the flip side of that, you're right. That was a 13-win team that got housed by the Niners. But in 2 years under Matt LaFleur, and everybody said, watch out for the dynamic between LaFleur and Rodgers. There's some friction. There's something going on. 2 division titles in 2 years after missing the playoffs.
Exactly. Looks pretty good to me, Zoo. Looks pretty good to me. The marriage between LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers is working. Now they got to make sure that the rest of the team comes to the party.
No doubt. Keep in mind, the 2 years before LaFleur, no playoffs. Aaron Rodgers obviously injured in that stead as well, but they are moving in the right direction. We're moving towards our Dr. Pepper Twitter question. We're asking this morning on our Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, and Chris Nation, who do you trust the most in the NFC playoff? We sort of came up with this question, but it sort of seems like every team has a little bit of a wart. It's not like it's as easy as picking the Chiefs in the AFC. So who do you trust most in the NFC? Chris has weighed in and said Seattle. At MNice1079 on the Dr. Pepper Twitter feed. Now, this is an interesting one considering what happened yesterday, but hey, it's your call. It's your opinion. He's going Rams. Defense will be prepared in the playoffs, just have to avoid turnovers. At hustle_God said, quote, Seattle, he's there with Chris, quote, Seattle, defense is bend but don't break, and Russ is Russ. I would even go a level higher than bend but don't break. I think they're playing pretty good defense, and Russ is indeed is Russ. And Chris at PatNice56 said Green Bay in the playoffs because they will be home. They get stomped in the Super Bowl by whoever they play. So he's, I think, thinking a Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl might be back-to-back for KC. But what's interesting is about the home, because it's not home field advantage by having the Lambeau Leap and all those folks there. It's the fact of the matter that who wants to go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, or Orchard Park, New York, even if there are no fans, who wants to go there? Do the Rams? Do the Bucks? Do these warm weather teams? That's the quote-unquote home field he's talking about.
Yeah, nobody wants to go there unless you're a certain Giants team back in 2011 or 2007. But no, I mean, it is a tremendous home field advantage for the Packers, dealing with the elements, your receivers getting used to catching the ball carriers, securing the ball. So I think there is something to it. If they're able to pull it off, if the standings stay as such, then that's going to be huge for the Packers moving forward.
We will see. We will see. On the way, what the best win and worst win in New York Jets franchise